Good morning and welcome back to the Now Morning Show, where this morning inside our spotlight we shine a light on the 23rd annual Transatlantic Trade and Investment Symposium happening on July 31st.
We are very happy to be having a conversation with Mr. Michael Sudakasa, CEO of the Africa Business Group, ABG. Welcome, sir. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Definitely our pleasure to have you. And even before we get into the conversation at hand in terms of the Trade and Investment Symposium, give us a little background on ABG, please.
Sure. We're an economic development firm based in Johannesburg, South Africa. We have been working really for much of this is our 20th year in November of 2025, on diaspora linkages, promoting trade and investment between the continent, the Americas, originally from the U.S., of Bahamian, American, and Nigerian heritage, moved to South Africa in '99, and so a commercial attorney. And so our focus, particularly over the last few years, as the spotlight on creating greater linkages with the Caribbean as really kind of the first region of the sixth region of the African Union, has been how do we help here in Trinidad and Tobago to create those linkages and those bridges.
And I really appreciate the fact that we're able to speak in terms of someone who has moved from space to space and jurisdiction to jurisdiction, because I think that helps build an appreciation for some of the things that are available, some of the things that are needed, and sometimes the fact that it makes no sense us fighting like testy siblings, because there's so many similarities. But in terms of 20 years, what are some of those lessons that you would have learned in terms of trying to bridge places and spaces?
Well, a big one, and I think this is where the Transatlantic Symposium comes in, is refamiliarization. We've been separated a long time between the Caribbean and the continent. We're still challenged with, to me, a lack of a direct flight. And so, when you have a knowledge event that allows businesses, the policymakers, to have a better sense of what's happening in contemporary Africa here, that helps. So, one of the platform and foundational things that we have to do is just learn a little bit more about contemporary, particularly economic issues on the continent or in the Caribbean. That's key. Also, mobility. It is a game changer for someone who's interested in either region to actually visit the region. From the Caribbean standpoint, to me, there's a tremendous opportunity for new markets on the continent. This year, we're focusing on Ghana and Nigeria. Nigeria is 230 million people. And you talked about linkages. You got heritage linkages here in Trinidad and Tobago with Nigeria and Ghana. That helps, because when you touch down, you'll see people who look like a cousin, look like an uncle, look like a sister or wife. So, that makes for a certain level of comfort. But at the same time, we have a lot of the information that we get about our respective regions through the lens of other people, other medias. So we bring often knowledge that needs to be updated, if you will, about what's happening on the continent, and trust, and how do you do business in this environment. So I think that, again, opportunities, and this is the 23rd, so every year having a chance to have this conversation is critical. One of the reasons that we're here is that we're realizing that, and this is probably our 6th or 7th participation in the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago's symposium, we need to do things between our fora. We need to actually take missions. We need to participate in trade shows. We need to start using digital tools to have more webinars, to familiarize one another, not only with, let's say, cultural things about the country, but just market opportunities. This is, to me, the industrial hub of the Caribbean. So how do we entice companies who may be interested in not just the Caribbean, but North America, South America, to say this is the hub for me. I'm excited that there's a new special economic zone.
And that's one of the things I want to get to. But even before we get to looking at those opportunities and how we can exploit them, looking at the word exploit in its best possible sense, that narrative that you speak of, until the lion tells its tale, it will those stories will favor the hunter. How do you go about dealing with that narrative? Is it that you try to myth bust? Is it that you say, okay, well, they say this, but this is the truth? Or is it that you just go about a different way? And what's your point of focus?
Sure. We really do encourage physical travel. Yesterday I had the opportunity to meet a local businesswoman who's in the communication space. The role of her company and companies like that on both sides are critical. Now we have YouTube and we can create our own travel channels, and people are doing that. Those are key. Our focus is trying to point to the available information for colleagues on both sides of the lake, if you will, or the pond. Because you still have to find them. You still have to search, what I think most people on the continent would know about Trinidad and Tobago is oil and gas. It's the steel band, that you're famous for, Calypso, Carnival, but that's just such a tip of iceberg. May not know about the work in agriculture that's here. I think it's critical as well, and I've, as I mentioned, come to the country a number of times, to also educate business people here about opportunities on the continent. I think there's tremendous potential for tourism to come from the continent here, to just explore what those who were taken away are doing today, and how how the countries have grown in this region. That also sets up people coming and saying, hey, I could do business here. I like what I'm seeing. Agriculture is a huge industry across the continent, so you have people who could come and work side by side with people here to expand the sector, not just for the country, but for the region and for South America, and even potential export to North America. So, I think you have to encourage people to move. Unfortunately, I talked about being from the U.S., played football. It's a contact sport. It's not a spectator sport. We can stay here and analyze and talk about it for a long time, and we won't move the ball. What I think is great is the work of the African Export-Import Bank. Over the last 4 or 5 years, they've been really creating a link, and as a financial institution, that's important. So they've invited Caribbean countries to become members of their organization. They've made commitments to invest in the region, to invest in the Caribbean Development Bank, for that bank to be able to on-lend to support transactions between this region and the continent. You need those steps, and they're happening.
And the more you speak, the more I understand the tenor behind your words. And I say that because you just spoke about gridiron football being a contact sport. So in terms of needing that level of physical engagement, and then even your business pursuits, and I might even dare say points of origin. So there's a level of what's in it for me, as opposed to, and this is a good thing, as opposed to speaking in theoretical, airy-fairy sort of language. But you also write articles. And I want to ask, what will be the thrust of your presentation come this 23rd edition of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Symposium? Sure.
Last year I had the real honor to be able to speak as well, and I talked about the statistics of trade and where the trade flows were between this country specifically, but also the region. This year, it's much more tactical and practical. The time is now to move. We've been talking about a Trinidad and Tobago African Caribbean Chamber. and starting the ability to actually, as I said before, work from the day after the first. We'll celebrate the first, and on the second, we'll start talking about how do we organize missions, plural, to get to the continent to be able to explore. Now I've met business people who have said, I'm ready to go. You know, we've been talking for about 4 or 5 years. I see an opportunity, whether it's in hair care products that I manufacture here that I want to sell on the continent. It could be, there's textiles on the continent that I want to bring to Trinidad and Tobago. Every year we are very adorned in African apparel. I want to be a part of that industry. You know, that's a key aspect. To me, I was saying to a colleague yesterday that Trinidad has something, and Tobago, that the continent is still lacking in many ways, which is energy. We have 600 million people out of roughly 1.4 billion people who don't have access to energy. But you have richness in that space. We're all talking about AI now. AI is energy intensive. Why couldn't Trinidad and Tobago be a hub for storage, a hub for IT and technology for those on the continent who are thinking about this region? So it's about thinking a bit outside the box. We have a relationship with the Nigerian Association of Special Economic Zones. We have a new special economic zone here. Why don't we create linkages between companies that might set up here and companies that are setting up there? We have the new relationship between the two aviation authorities. When do we start talking about getting those flights going? Even if one of them is a charter as opposed to a regular flight. But let's push the envelope a bit. That's really going to be the theme of my discussion on Thursday.
And I like the fact that you speak about linkages and as well as timelines. And speaking of timelines, we have about 2 minutes. But where do you think are the easiest points of entry? Our Trade Minister, Satyakama Maharaj, who is an entrepreneur, so understands this a little better.
Excellent.
He is saying that, yes, we need to have a larger presence. We need to have more engagement with the African continent. But what are some of those easier points of entry that we can start to move as somebody who's been to about 32 of them?
So I think, you know, I talked about tourism. Tourism works because tourism is a service sector that's an export sector that is a 4X generator on both sides. And out of, you know, those missions of exploration, people will come back with business opportunity. I didn't plan to do a big plug, but I met the entrepreneur who's local, who started EcoWash. Jareem has huge potential because his business is for young people, or can be for young people. It's cost effective. That one I'd be leading, and I'd be trying to get support from, you know, any ministries here to promote, because we also need some quick wins in this.
And he's been part of a mission
exactly
already.
A few years ago. So it's about doubling down on the opportunities and showing some success. That's the thing that I'm saying. We've been talking about this for some time without being able to say, here's 5 Trinidad and Tobago companies that are operating in Africa. There's some. I met a gentleman from a Nigerian oil company that's recently, I think, invested here or plans to invest here. But again, these names are not household names. We need some household names of transactions that involve the Caribbean and the continent.
And with that, we want to thank you so much, Mr. Michael Sudakasa, International Trade and Infrastructure Chair, Africa CSO Committee of the Africa-EU Partnership Forum, as well as the CEO of the Africa Business Group, here for the 23rd Annual Transatlantic Trade and Investment Symposium that is taking place on the 31st of July. You do not want to miss it. ESC, the Emancipation Support Committee of Trinidad and Tobago, they have all the information on their page, and we have more information after we return from this break on the Now Morning Show.